And like I did mention, right, that I don't have any marks for attendance, and Madhi sir has assured me that this time there is no auto withdrawal for missing classes. So the attendance is just a formality. Okay. So then let's do the official way. It's easier. It's easier on me as well than trying to tick every box. Okay, so I just have to put in the URL somewhere and click submit. And I'll show you how I do it next class. Okay, so any questions on the previous lecture?
No, sir.
Anybody? Shall we continue? My previous lecture was actually, let me get to, hang on, present.
Sir, can you share your screen?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the previous lecture, actually lecture 1, we did in 2 classes, right? We did it quite slow.
Yep.
Um, Once again, anybody, anything you would like me to repeat from the previous lecture? No one? Okay, and let's start today. What time is it? 3 minutes. Shall we start? Anybody? Does anybody need a break before we begin? Okay, so today's first topic is there are two terms that we have all heard many times, right? LAN and WAN, right? So we start with the definition of this. And uh, to remember the three transmission methods, simplex, half duplex, full duplex. Everyone? Does anyone not remember? Okay, next, those were standard terms. And the other set of standard terms were um, unicast, multicast, and broadcast. Does everyone remember these three? Does anyone not remember these three? So I'm reminding you of those because one of them is connected. So for the case of unicast, multicast, and broadcast, right? Unicast meant directed towards one target destination only. Broadcast was towards anybody? Towards everybody. And multicast was towards a group. So when I explained that, I mentioned that the definition of everybody could also be context dependent, right? Right? I mentioned, how do you define everybody? Is it everybody in the world or everybody in this country or everybody at IUB? So it depends on the application. And multicast is a group within everybody. So I'm bringing that up because here the distinction between these two is also context dependent and vague, or in other words, it's not precisely defined. It'll become clear as we go along. So the criteria for distinguishing one type of network from another is difficult and often vague. It's the same analogy as multicast versus broadcast, right? So we use a few criteria such as size. Can everyone see my mouse?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Here you go.
Okay, okay. So depending on, we use a few criteria such as size or geographical coverage or ownership to make this distinction. So there are two types of networks, LAN and a WAN, local area network versus a wide area network. So generally speaking, a LAN is privately owned. It is one organization that covers a single host or a single building or a single campus or a single organization, a single office, single company. Depending on the needs of the organization, a LAN may be as simple as two PCs and a printer in someone's home office, right? In your home, if you have a home router, multiple mobile devices connected to the home router, that's a wireless LAN. Wi-Fi is short for wireless LAN. Or it can be IUB's internal network, which includes maybe now, I guess we don't, they added a few high-tech equipment, maybe, if there are IoT devices. And each host in the LAN is identified by a MAC address. Is everyone aware of a MAC address? Is anyone not aware? And mobile devices, some Android mobile devices have a MAC address. The general identifier for a mobile device is the IMEI number, which is the MAC address equivalent. Right? It's a unique physical ID of every hardware device. And a packet sent by one host to another carries the source and destination host's MAC addresses. That is how the destination host knows who it is intended for.
Sir, how does
Yes.
people change the IMEI number?
Please say it again.
How does people change the IMEI number?
How does someone?
I'm gonna write it in chat.
Please.
Sir, how does someone change their IMEI number?
Change. You are not allowed, you cannot change the IMEI number ever. You're not allowed to change it.
It's basically like MAC address. I think it's unique and
Exactly. It's
yeah.
hard coded into the device. It's like a serial number provided by the device manufacturer. It's the MAC address equivalent. It is all unique. Every device, every phone has a separate IMEI number, and multi-SIM phones have, dual SIM have two IMEI numbers, one for each SIM.
Sir,
like our
sir,
fingerprints.
recently, sir,
Like your
একজনকে
fingerprint, exactly.
Sir, hello.
Go ahead.
স্যার রিসেন্টলি আমাদের বাংলাদেশের পুলিশে একজনকে স্যার ধরছে যে আইএমইআই নাম্বার গুলো চেঞ্জ করতেছে স্যার
হ্যাঁ।
এটা স্যার গতকালকেই স্যার এটা
আচ্ছা, হ্যাঁ, এটা অনেকদিন ধরে নিউজে আগের থেকে ছিল, মানে those basically, okay, so does everyone understand the question? I'm sure everyone's aware of it.
Yeah, could you repeat, sir? What did you say?
Yeah, he's saying, recently Bangladesh police ধরেছে someone, মানে ইয়েতে নিউজে রেগুলারলি আসছে someone changing IMEI numbers. Right? That was exactly your question.
Yeah.
ইয়েস স্যার
Okay. আচ্ছা, এখন আমি আসি এই যে correct statement scenario is you cannot change an IMEI number. It is provided uniquely. It is fingerprint বলবো না. It's sort of like আমাদের দেশের কনটেক্সটে চিন্তা করি, everyone has a unique national ID number. ঠিক আছে? So changing an IMEI number is equivalent to making a fake NID card. You're using someone else's. So এখানে যেটা করে, মানে ওই ডিভাইস ইলিগাল ডিভাইস ম্যানুফ্যাকচার করে একটা, মানে বুঝতে পারছো, মানে IMEI নাম্বারটা কি হয়, ইট ইজ রেজিস্টার্ড সামওয়্যার। সো রেজিস্ট্রেশন ছাড়া ওই অত ডিজিটের একটা নিজে একটা নাম্বার বানায় ওটার মধ্যে দিয়ে দেয়। Okay.
Could you please say it again in English?
Yeah, sure, Khadija. So, did you understand the question, right? His question was, people change IMEI numbers. He was mentioning that the police caught someone yesterday. It's been in the news for 6 months to a year. I mean, there are different times where the government says that it will crack down on illegal mobile imports. And you need to, I don't know if you have heard of it, right? Now, all the SIMs need to be registered, right? Everyone knows that.
No, sir, I didn't hear that.
Okay,
Yeah.
all the SIM cards need to be registered with your national ID number and your fingerprint. There were proposals of requiring the IMEI numbers also to be registered of your phone, which would mean if you went abroad and brought a phone, you would not be able to use it here. Your SIM will not work in that phone if that was the case.
It will
And
be locked, sir, right?
Sorry?
It will be country locked.
No. Locked is a separate issue. Locked means it's encrypted communication. The mobile company cannot decrypt it. Even if it is unlocked, if your IMEI number is not registered with your mobile company, they will not, every packet that goes from your SIM has your SIM phone number and also the device IMEI number in it. So if your IMEI is not registered, the mobile company would not forward your call. I mean, that was the plan, that all IMEI numbers also need to be registered. It didn't get implemented as yet. So that would be the case, that if you bought a phone abroad and brought it here, you will not be able to use it. So what about a visitor, right? A tourist coming. The plan was he would register the phone at the airport when he lands, and his IMEI would be registered for 2 weeks or 1 month, and then it would cancel. And then if you bought a phone abroad, you would be allowed to, let's say, legally import 2 a year or something like that. You would also register it at the airport. So that would stop is everyone following me?
Yeah, so basically they're trying to stop the illegal processing of
Yeah, there's stop
phones,
two
yeah.
things. One is illegal imports. So when
Yeah.
you buy an iPhone and let's say Eiffel Square, it needs to be legally imported, which means
Yeah.
you need to pay all the taxes and all. You cannot buy a phone abroad, bring it here and sell it privately, right? Because if you brought it abroad, you would register it in your name. And if you sell it, you will not be allowed to change the registration. And second, yeah, exactly, illegal phone manufacturing, which is internationally illegal. You're supposed to it's you're supposed to ask for a unique IMEI form, from wherever it's internationally registered. The MAC address case should be familiar to all, right? Every LAN card has a unique MAC address, which is registered with IEEE. Okay, clear? Okay, so I think we're, I guess, getting, what's the word, outside our main point, but as all that I said now is sort of general knowledge. Part of it is topic of the wireless communication class. Anyway, so is everyone with me? Does anyone need me to repeat?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, sir.
Okay, so that was all that I said was general knowledge. The main sentence for the point for the syllabus is the last bullet point here, right? So the packet has the destination host's MAC address. Okay, these are two common LAN topologies. So in the last class also we learned the 4 physical topologies. Does everyone remember?
Yes, sir.
Mesh, star, bus, and ring. So here we see that the traditional LAN, the first LAN, had the bus topology, and that particular LAN was called the Ethernet. So I use the term conventional Ethernet design. So in the past, all hosts in a network were connected through a common bus, right? Which was the conventional Ethernet design. So then let's say host 2 wants to send a packet to host 4. So host 2 would put the packet in the bus. That packet would traverse the entire bus in both directions. All hosts would see it. It would have host 4's destination at MAC address as the destination MAC address. So then whenever every other host sees it, it will ignore the packet, and host 4 will receive it. So the intended recipient will keep the packet, the other will ignore it. Okay. This is the conventional LAN design, and this LAN is called the Ethernet. I'm sure you have all heard the term. It was the first LAN. Today's most LANs use a star topology using a switch, which is in this manner. So here, if host 2 wants to send a message to host 4, you will send it to the switch. Switch will see the destination address. You will forward it to only that particular host and not the others. So more efficient.
Sir, the example in A, the bus topology. If host
Louder, please.
Okay.
I'm saying louder, please, or write it down. Can't hear you.
Sir, is it clear now?
Yes, clearer now.
Sir, I was talking in the example A, if host 2 sends an information to host 4, the information is going to travel till host 8?
It does.
It's going to go to every single host, but only the host 4 can access it.
In the bus topology, exactly, it goes to every single host. Okay, everyone can access it, but everyone will not.
Okay, sir.
Because first thing to remember is this is a private LAN, right?
Yes, sir.
So you're assuming there is no one in here who is a serious spy.
Yes, sir.
Right? Second, if there is privacy issue, that privacy is ensured by other means. Imagine it's a server, it's a mail packet. Okay, even if every host receives it, there is still a login password required.
Which is only given by the
Only the user, exactly.
Okay, sir.
Okay. And this is the start. Okay. So next, let's come to what is a WAN. So by definition, a WAN is an interconnection of LANs. So WAN is also an interconnection of devices capable of communicating. However, there are some differences. A LAN is normally limited in size, spanning an office or a campus, and a WAN has a wider geographical span, spanning a town, a city, or a country. This is the general distinction. And like I mentioned before, broadcast versus multicast, the meaning is context dependent. Right? So typically by WAN, we mean the internet. By LAN, we mean your private LAN in your office. Now, if your office is Grameenphone, then their Grameen LAN is an interconnection of multiple LANs. Same at IUB, right? Each department has a LAN. But all the departmental LANs together make the big IUB LAN. It does not make a WAN. Okay? So a LAN interconnects hosts. WAN interconnects routers and switches and different LANs. A LAN is normally privately owned by an organization, and a WAN is normally public, created and run by communication companies and leased by the organizations using it. So your ISP would be running a WAN of connecting all its subscribers' LANs. You see my point? Is it clear for everyone, Khadija?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
Okay. And once again, right, remember I am supposed to pause after every slide. So please tell me, I mean, if you need me to, please tell me.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Then we see two kinds of, previously we saw point-to-point and multi-point connections. The same thing with WANs. In some terminology, a multi-point WAN is often called a switched WAN, and a point-to-point WAN is essentially non-existent, just a theoretical construct. We'll see. So by definition, a point-to-point WAN is two WANs interconnected by a shared medium. When a multi-point is like multiple WANs interconnected by a switch, by multiple switches. So a point-to-point WAN is a network that interconnects two communicating devices through a medium, and a switched WAN is network with more than two WANs. Okay. Okay. So in terms of examples, like the first, it is very rare to see a LAN or WAN in isolation, right? They're usually connected. So by definition, when two or more LANs are connected, they make an internetwork, which is short of which is internet. So in the previous class, we defined a network, which is multiple computers connected, right? And multiple computers connected, a few computers connected make a LAN. Few computers in one geographical area owned by one organization. Multiple LANs connected, which would be multiple networks connected, is called an internetwork. So for a point-to-point WAN example, one example would be, suppose IUB has a Chittagong office, Chittagong campus. So suppose IUB wanted its Dhaka campus and its Chittagong campuses connected through some private dedicated connection. Maybe they set up their own connection. So that would be a point-to-point WAN. It's possible they leased the line from, let's say, Mango or a public ISP, but the public ISP guarantees that this line will be dedicated. Okay. So, this would provide IUB some more level of security. No, within their two connections, there is no external person connected. Right? Dedicated in terms of security, dedicated in terms of guaranteed bandwidth. So here, the textbook gives an example of maybe some company has an office in the US East Coast in New York City and in the US West Coast in Los Angeles. And they want a dedicated connection. Another example could be, suppose one particular bank has multiple branches and they want all their branches connected to the head office using, if it's a bank, right, some private connection. So that would be, it would still be a multi-point WAN, but a private multi-point WAN. Everyone okay? Next as example, this is an example of a multi-point WAN, and this full picture could be taken as a representative snapshot of the full internet. So we saw the simplest connection of two LANs, right? Just two LANs directly connected as a point-to-point WAN connection. And this multi-point could be a full snapshot of, let's say, a city. So that in the top we have a resident, an individual home subscriber connected by a dial-up modem, right? Connected by a dial-up modem to the internet. Here we have a more sophisticated modern home with a Wi-Fi router, multiple devices connected by the Wi-Fi router. Wi-Fi router is connected to his ISP. And this person has a more sophisticated ISP than this person who uses a dial-up connection. Okay. This, let's say, is a company. Let's say this is IOB, right? This could even mean multiple LANs. Imagine 2 branches interconnected by a switch, connected to a large ISP. And all of these are interconnected in the national backbone. So that should make sense now. A heterogeneous network made up of 4 WANs and 3 LANs, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 WANs, 1, 2, 3 LANs. One LAN is a trivial LAN, this home one. Please stop for a moment, understand this. This is a very representative picture of a network, of a national network. At the end, I'll add just a bit more complication and we'll get the full world picture. So we started with, this is the simplest. Like the simplest would be a LAN in your home office. Next is 2 LANs connected. This is all kinds of LANs connected in a city. Okay. 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 Now let's give me a 2-minute break. I'll get a drink of water. We'll start another topic. Okay, everyone. Does anyone need a break?
Could you give me 2 minutes?
Sure, go ahead. For everyone, you can go through the previous slides.
Sir, the assignments does not have any deadline. Can you please
Say it again,
clear
please.
on that part? The assignments which you gave, it does not have any deadline. Can you please
Okay,
clear
okay,
that?
we'll get to that. So the assignments, I was going to mention this at the end. These are just practice problems, okay? You do not have to submit it. Because, in this online setting, right, it is not possible to accept so many online assignments and print it and check it. So we have to, we have to work with the assumption that you will have initiative and maturity. So for everyone, the point I have in mind is these assignments are mock exams, sample exams. So study the textbook and then try to do the assignments yourself, do the problems yourself with the open book. Okay. If you can answer all the questions I have picked out, solve all the problems, that would mean you have understood this chapter, and that would mean you will be able to answer every question on the exam. Because for the midterm and final, for every course, even for normal scenarios, what I do is before the midterm, I print out all the assignments and quizzes I gave, have all the pages in front of me on my table, and then sample pick a few problems from, all those, and then change the numbers or make a minor twist. Once again, that's the way I make my exams. Before the exam, I print out all the assignments I've given, and then I pick problems from those. Worst case, I have 1 new problem out of 4 maximum. And if the previous 3 problems are 3-4 parts A, B, C, D, 1 or 2 problem part D, I will change the formula, right? I will change I will have you derive the formula. Every other, something like 70-80% of the questions will be exactly the same with just the numbers changed. And in my experience, I've seen that is fair. It's not that I'm being too easy. Meaning that if you can solve all of these at the undergrad level, if you can solve 70-80% of the textbooks problems, you do know the material. Just 20%, I might have a bit of a twist where I want you to now that you know the existing material, can you think a bit more like a researcher? Okay. So to summarize, the idea is study the textbook, don't look at the problems. First, read the book, read the relevant parts that I've pointed out that match the slides, and then do the problems yourself on a cool mind, right, with the book open. And at the end, if you have been able to do them, you know this chapter. Okay.
All right, sir.
Okay, let's continue. Whoever left are you back?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Okay, because I stopped here for a reason. If we were doing the 400 level formal networks class, this slide would be the first slide I would teach. This is also typically the first question on a networks exam at the undergrad level. This was the first exam on my PhD qualifying exam as well. So I'm not telling you that this will be the question, right? I can't tell you what my question will be, but I'm telling you quite openly that on most network exams, this is the first question. So do you get my point?
Yes,
and that is why I stopped. So the question is, what is the difference between a circuit switch network and a packet switch network? So once again, in a formal networks course, this is the first slide, because all networks are separated into two kinds at the top level: circuit switched and packet switched. And our first class, I give you a brief telecommunication history, right? I didn't tell you the history. We sort of recollected the history, right? The first communication, when you look back or think of a general knowledge, was through homing pigeons carrying messages. Next was the telegraph line, right? Through Morse code using the railway lines. The reason I'm saying that is, so sort of telecommunication using technology, we could say started with telegraph in the year around the 1800s. So from the year 1800 to the 1960s, so 160 years, only kind of networks that were known were circuit switch networks. Packet switch network has been defined in the last 60 years, since 1960, has been in practice since 1990. So the reason I'm saying this is, in the whole 200-year history of communication, you realize that this is very new, right? This is a modern concept. And when you're trying to, if you're the packet switch network inventor, you're trying to contradict 160 years of existing knowledge. It is not easy. Okay. So to study that, first, let's see what once again, right? So this is the first common question. What is the difference between a circuit switch and a packet switch network? And to know that is important, because circuit switch was once again the traditional telephone network. And the last 30 years, we have switched to packet switch, because this has some advantages. And obviously, there's some disadvantages as well, which is why for the proponents of this, for the discoverer of this, it was hard to argue. Details will become clear as I explain them. So the definition of a circuit switch network is, in a circuit switch network, you get a dedicated connection, which is always available between two WAN systems. Path is fixed, resources dedicated to the link. Switch only makes it active or inactive. I'll explain. So this is your landline telephone network. Once again, this is the landline telephone network. You have your home landline telephone. It could be cordless, but your base, the handset is cordless. The base is connected by a wire to your socket in the wall, everyone. Right? That is connected to TNT, right? BTTB. The LAN phones are all connected by a physical network. This would be the nearest exchange. Is everyone with me? So let's say this first phone on the left is calling the first phone on the right. When you dial the phone number, it rings, or the exchange makes a connection, and you're connected. Okay? Now, here connection means there is a dedicated links, in all the links. Obviously, this is a very simplistic example. Imagine this is in Chittagong, this is in Dhaka. obviously it's going through multiple links here, but it, maybe let's look at this example. Let's say you have a landline on this side. Let's call this A, and so let's say this is A. We number it clockwise. This is B, C, D, E. Let's say A is calling E. Everyone. Let's say A is calling E. So once these two lines are connected using two landline telephones, a path will be set up. Now, in this case, there are two options for the path. You could be connected to E through this way, to the right, or to the left. Everyone. Depending on which side links are less congested, a smart router will provide the connection in that route, that way. Okay? So let's say the top right is connected. Let's say you're connected in this manner. Is everyone with me? That means,
Yes, sir.
is it vague to anyone?
No, sir.
Okay. So that would mean, let's say once again, my names were, where did my mouse go? A is connected to H through B and C. Okay. So resources, one line on each of these backbone links is reserved for you. This is how a landline telephone works. And I'll tell you what the alternate is. And then there are, as you keep talking, your phone microphone converts your voice to electrical signals. It could be a digital, it could be analog. It doesn't matter, right? Electrical signals. As you keep talking, your phone converts into electrical signals, and this signal is continuously, this current is continuously flowing along this circuit to the other end. If it's an optical backbone, this will be connected, and EO modulator will convert the electrical signal to an optical pulse. It will, once you speak, that pulse will flow to the other end. Okay? So the result is guaranteed performance. I'll see why this is slow compared to the other. Okay. And this is the example is legacy. Legacy here means traditional landline telephone networks. Alternative is now in an IP-based network. You do not, as you keep talking, now imagine we replace our phone with an IP phone. All of you are aware of IP phones, right? IOB's main exchange is now an IP phone with a 096 number. Imagine your home phone is now an IP phone. An IP phone, what would happen is if you keep talking, as you talk, your phone, your conversation in real time will not get converted to electrical signals and will not continuously flow through the line. Once again, if you keep talking, it will be converted to electrical signal. If it's digital, it will be converted to bits, but it will not continuously flow over the line. In a packet switch network, what happens is groups of bits are grouped into blocks called packets. Okay. So these bits are collected into blocks called packets. Packets flow discretely. Okay. So it is not continuous bits traveling. Bits will be grouped into packets. So this is a quantized method. Each packet will individually flow first. Second, let's get back to this slide network. This is an ideal way of explaining this one. Second, each packet may not flow the same route because resources are not reserved for you. So here a dedicated connection is not reserved between A and H. Imagine, let's imagine this is a private, a public road network. Okay. A VIP person, the president wants to go from his house to his office. Prime Minister wants to go from his house to his office. So in this case, what happens typically? The roads are, right? Every end is blocked, right? There's a dedicated route made, right? We suffered this quite regularly, right? The Prime Minister wants to go from home to his office, to her office. So all the other side roads are blocked, road is cleared, the route is dedicated. Next level, imagine not the Prime Minister, a minister wants to go. Often, there are multiple police cars before and in front and behind him. So he's not trying to reserve the whole road. He's trying to reserve a lane, right? In front and before, so that he has seamless travel. Okay? So this is a circuit switch network. Packet switched, on the other hand, is suppose you are sending multiple packets from A to H. You are talking to H. So in a packet switch network, what will happen is first your whole conversation, as you keep talking, once you have said 10 words, will be made into one packet. That will be put into the network with the destination IP address. The packet will be routed at every router by the destination IP address. Each packet may not travel the same route. So each packet will make a real-time decision based on the network congestion at that point. Okay? So the costs of this is, first, I mentioned before, right? If there is a lot of jitter in the system, that means there's too much variability, which means packet 3 might arrive before packet 2. So the receiver must be able to, again, buffer, store a few, put them in order before he sends it to before he presents the packets, right? Obviously, when you talk on a phone, mobile conversation, we use an IP network. You know, the second statement I'm saying does not reach you before the first, because the network makes an estimate on the average delay and the average jitter, waits for a few packets. If they come out of order, it is reordered at the receiver and then presented to the listener. Okay. So the entire concept of this, consequences of this will not be clear after one day, but once we finish the course, then the results will be quite, the difference between the two pros and cons will be quite clear. And I'll give you more examples, don't worry. So in a circuit switch network, once again, there's a dedicated, so this should make sense now. A dedicated connection called a circuit is always available between two L systems. So a physical connection is made, right? Every link is reserved. And in packet switch, instead of continuous communication that we see between two telephone sets when they're being used, this is the exchange of individual data packets between two computers. Now let's see. So let's do the comparative study. One thing you may have realized, I'm sure, I don't know if you have realized, is international calling rates have significantly reduced over the past few years. I don't mean WhatsApp and Viber. I mean actually calling from, using a network provider. Right? Are you aware of that? Like just 10 years ago, if you had to actually call a physical phone in New York City, even from your mobile, now it's what, 10 taka per minute, roughly? International calling? Right? Is anyone aware of this? It used to be 100 taka per minute, and you had to reserve a trunk call, right? Call your.
Yeah, sometimes you have to buy calling card.
Yeah, no, calling cards are cheaper, but previously, if you directly called from your phone, is anyone aware of this?
Yes, sir.
Right. The reason is all calling cards use what we call VoIP. VoIP is illegal for a separate reason. All calling card use voice over IP, use an IP network. So imagine a circuit switch connection. So you're connected to your friend in New York City. Now, typically on a telephone, both sides are not talking at the same time, right? Even though it's a full duplex connection, typically you're using it half duplex just for etiquette, right? Otherwise, if you talk at the same time, you will not be able to listen. So usually one person talks and the other listens, right? So usually what does this mean? Half the capacity is being wasted, right? Next, no one, if you look at a 10-minute period, if you follow the voltage time, the voltage plot over the full conversation, right? Imagine a voltage plot in front of you. You will notice gaps, periods where no one has said anything, right? Just a human conversation. Everyone, if you are downloading, on the other hand, if you are downloading a large file, then there are bits continuously flowing. If you are using torrents, you could be downloading and uploading at the same time. There are bits continuously flowing in both directions. But right? But imagine a regular telephone conversation between two people. So, first, half of it is wasted 100% of the time, almost 100% of the time, because almost 100% of the time, one side is talking. Second, these were actual calculations done. Something like 20-30% of the time, people pause between words, between sentences, so no one is using it. So the idea was, if you could actually share that channel between multiple people, and when you are not talking, I will insert bits from another pair of people talking. You see the idea? If you could smartly fill the pipe in this manner, like take bits from different people and fill up the gaps, you would be able to share this cost of the line among multiple people, multiple pairs. You see the point? This was the general idea of packet switch network. And the idea
is there
was,
any time dedicated to it?
Sorry?
Is there any time dedicated to it?
Typically, okay, I'll give you a mobile phone example. Typically, what a GSM or 3G connection does, even 4G, the GSM system does, each conversation is given a 200 kilohertz band. And that band is rotated among 8 telephone calls. See, if you call your friend, your phone is connected, but actually that connection is shared between 8 people. So there are gaps where you're not connected. You could complain to your mobile company that you are billing me for this period. If I write, you're billing me for the 10 minutes that I'm connected to this person. But in this 10 minutes, you've actually given this same connection to 10 people. And the mobile company would argue that I'm actually billing you for 1/10 of the cost of my cost of this connection. It's actually rotated among 8 people. But it's rotated so quickly that you don't feel it. But if you were, let's say, sending in continuous stream of data, right, and you had a network monitoring probe, you would see that your data flows and then there is a gap. That in a 10-minute period, it's flowing only 1/8 of the time. Okay. So just the pros and but is the benefit of this clear, right? Benefit of using packet switch over circuit switch. Right? Generally, you will get greater capacity. Capacity is greater number of bits per second can flow through the same channel because you're not wasting. So the first one, right? The links can be shared on demand instead of kept reserved. That is remaining idle when not in use. That was the brilliant idea. Right? These are the benefits. Now, the cost of this is typically another. So this was the first modification that network designers made. That if you have observed that 20%. Let me give you an example of your LAN. Let's say IUB LAN, right? IUB in a IUB particular lab. Okay. Suppose each computer needs to be given a 10 Mbps speed. Okay, for the labs we conduct or this conversation we are having, right? You need a minimum bandwidth required for the voice. We are technically allowed to have video as well, right? So suppose your home ISP has promised you a certain minimum bandwidth, everyone. So just to make calculations easier, suppose your home ISP has promised you minimum 10 Mbps connection. Suppose your ISP has bought 100 Mbps connection from a national service provider, everyone. So how many subscribers can your ISP provide in this calculation? 10, right? I mean, I've made the numbers easy. Now your ISP will typically give connection to more than 10. He will assume, okay, this is again, I have promised each of my subscribers 10 Mbps. I have bought a 100 Mbps backbone link, but I know that all my 10 will not be online at the same time.
Yes.
So I will give a connection to 15. And I will hope that not more than 10 are online at the same time. You see the point? And this is legally allowed. So what the ISP does is, let's say after the first month, the ISP will make a calculation. Okay, let me see my subscribers' usage patterns. Typically, how many are on at the same time on average, or what is the maximum people that have been online at the same time? So I know more. Maybe I'll keep a bit of a buffer, and then I can oversubscribe. Are you guys aware of how airline tickets are priced? Now everything is different, but previously, do you know that most airlines would actually sell 20% more tickets than the number of seats on every flight?
No, sir.
Was anyone aware of that?
So assuming that most of them, some of them can cancel the tickets.
Exactly.
Like that.
See, this one depends on the airline. A budget carrier, right? Everyone knows what a budget carrier is, right?
Sir, can you explain?
Right? Let's say, someone, let's say AirAsia or a cheap carrier or a domestic flight would sell maybe 5% more tickets. A large carrier such as Emirates, which has very expensive tickets, right? Large international routes would sell 20% more, because their calculations say that for domestic short haul, people miss flights less, change their plans less. Large flight people change their flights more. It has actually happened to me last year. I showed up at the airport. I was coming from UK to Dhaka through Bahrain on Gulf Air. Right? I had a one-day stopover in Bahrain. So I had a friend there. So I stayed with him for one day. Next day, go to the airport for the onward flight to Dhaka. They said the flight is overbooked. Typically, and what they did is they offered me an upgrade to business class the next day. They offered me $200 as compensation. They offered me a free hotel for that night. So I did not mind. But the calculation they make is this was a cost to them, right? They had to pay me to, not allow me to travel on a ticket that I paid for. But they know that, on a month, on average, a lot of people will buy the ticket. Not some people, for some reason, will change their mind, and the seats will go empty. So they oversubscribe a little bit. And how much they oversubscribe, that is a decision based on their history, right? How many passengers on average have not showed up. And typically during Eid or Christmas, they will oversubscribe less because they know most people will show up. Okay? So on a packet switch, the connection here is on a packet switch network, you're able to do this. And you're also legally allowed to do this because technically this is a term that is used. A packet switch networks allows or promises only best effort service. This is a technical term. I should have made this in red. You do not guarantee service. Even legally speaking. So then this comes to now in practice, the entire internet is by definition packet switched. So imagine it's a bank, right? Where once again, you need your network to be realistic. You send a message. Some of the packets also in a packet switched, first it may be slow if there is congestion. Packets will be dropped during congestion. It's often dropped because suppose it goes to an intermediate router, right? This is congested. So the router will keep on buffering. Imagine the buffer is also full. Then if a new packet comes, it will be dropped. So packet will be lost. Okay. So how this is handled depends on the application. There are other levels of correction methods being built. So if this was a banking network, after every packet that is sent, the sender will expect an acknowledgement from the receiver. After every 100 packets that is sent, sender will expect an acknowledgement from the receiver. So something is dropped, it will be resent. If it's real-time video transmission, one packet is dropped, one frame is dropped, it doesn't matter, right? If out of 30 frames per second, if you display 29 frames in one particular second, it doesn't matter. If you're doing, guys, give me a two minutes. Forgotten to plug my laptop in. Okay. if you are into gaming, right? That it's if you're a professional gamer, you will probably still use a packet switch connection, but you will use a very expensive connection where you will pay for a reserve or high level of average bandwidth more than you need. If you are doing remote surgery, you will use a circuit switch connection, because there you don't have time for a delay, you don't have time for a bit getting dropped, right? Or a bit getting flipped. A bit getting flipped might mean you're telling your robotic arm for a remote surgery to go right instead of left. Okay. Is everyone clear? And so this one, once again, please read the book, right? I've pretty much said it. This is quite likely to be the first question on the exam, right? To explain to me the difference between the two. Another point to bring up is, so on an exam, usually one question I have subparts of definitions. And for definitions, you cannot give me the textbook definition. You cannot give me the definition from any other textbook. You have to write in your own words, right? Because open book exam, copying a definition from the textbook does not make sense. And if you copy a definition from any of the standard textbooks, I will probably know, because I know the standard definitions in the common textbooks. So your choice is either to buy some remote country textbook or to write in your own words. Okay? Okay. Next. So previously, we saw that a network is a network is a connection of multiple computers, which we also called a LAN. An internetwork is multiple LANs connected. Now let's see the distinction between these two terms. Internet is short for internetwork, and internet with a small I versus a capital I. Now, small I, once again, internet means a network of networks, multiple LANs connected. And the internet is the specific network of multiple public web servers connected. Once again, an internet with a small I is a network of any networks, an interconnection of any LANs. The internet with a capital I is the specific interconnection of the public web servers. Does the definition make sense from our general knowledge? Right? By internet, we mean web browsing. It is the public web servers. And banks, and often a term intranet is used for this, right? Which would mean, let's say, a particular bank's internal network of different branches interconnected. Okay? And this diagram is a snapshot, is actually the topological diagram of the global internet. So in the world, there are a few international backbone networks, a few, not many. These are connected at different exchange points to to some regional ISPs. Here, regional, I mean in a global context. Let's say an ISP in Singapore. These then would be connected to different national ISPs through submarine cables. So here, this could be Bangladesh's BTRC buying a connection. And then from here, these would be connected to some national ISPs, let's say Link 3 or Banglaline or one of those. And then a company would take a connection from Link 3. A residential provider would take connection from some sub ISPs that buy from Link 3 and provide a local connection. Can you imagine the entire network now? The entire global internet now.
Sir,
Right?
can I go through again?
Yeah. So globally, there are a few global backbone internet connection network providers, a few, which cover the world, right? Cover big, massive, big routers with high rates, high service capability around the world. There are actually 32 DNS servers in the world where when you write a URL, right, web URL, that needs to be resolved to an IP address. There are just 32 in the world. So a few backbone networks. These are interconnected to regional ISPs through some global exchange points called peering points. And here again, by regional, I mean one in every global region, let's say in Singapore. This will be connected, let's say in Singapore, through the submarine cable to each country's national network. Let's say BTRC. And here also, often if the submarine cable is down in the past, right, you would not have any connection. Now there are some few redundant links as well. There is a satellite VSAT backup connection as well, right? Obviously more than one link for these major connections. So this would be, let's say, your BTRC. That would be, and then the national ISPs, major national ISPs, let's say Mango and Link3, would connect to BTRC. Okay? Then big corporations would take a connection, these are connection would connect to Mango. For a subscriber, there may be one more level where your local ISP buys a connection from Link3 and resells. Okay? So then to access the internet gets to the next point. For a home user, you can access in many different ways, using the telephone network, using a dial-up service, or the old-fashioned method. Using by wireless, there are two ways. You could connect to your home wireless router that is connected to the landline terrestrial ISP network. Or you could connect through your 4G to the mobile operator's tower. Mobile operator at the end is also, your mobile tower will be connected to their back central tower, which would again be connected through a landline backbone link to BTRC. So Grameen's connection to BTRC, Grameen's international connection, is not completely wireless, right? Their backbone would be connected to a optical backbone. Their main tower would be connected to an optical backbone to the national grid. Does this make sense? Can everyone imagine? A lot of imagination at test. Right? The other way around is Grameen would be connected to the national optical grid. That will be wirelessly transmitted through its main tower to all the BTSs, all the BTS controlled BTS towers around the country. Okay? Using cable networks, there's one company here, I think Beximco started it. It's not that popular here. In some countries, the cable TV, cable operator has a particular category 5 cable where that cable also transmits data as well as cable TV. So for a cable internet connection, you would be, your cable that comes to your home from your cable company, TV cable, would be connected to a particular modem, which would split it into two sub-modems. One to go to your router for your network, the other to go to your TV for the cable TV connection. So the bandwidth there would be separated into data and cable TV. I think Beximco offered that here, but in Bangladesh, typically we take cable from a cable company, right, and data from a ISP separate. Okay. So that is the official syllabus. Is everyone with me?
Yes, sir.
So it's a couple of slides again, just the history of the internet. It's from the book. This is just for curiosity and just to understand the full picture. I will not ask you a history question. So here we realize, right, that circuit switch is the legacy network for 200 years, right? So in up to 1960, telephone and telegraph networks. In 61, this person's PhD thesis at MIT, Leonard Kleinrock, he explained the theory of packet switching for bursty traffic. By bursty meaning not continuous, where data occurs in bursts and then there is a gap. So he mentioned that you could, if you do a bit of probabilistic management, right, you could fit in a lot more data into a limited line. Then in 67, the US defense, research or allowed some research into making computer networks. So the ARPANET was one of the first small network of connected computers. Then from the US defense, it was practiced in California, around University of California at Los Angeles, at Santa Barbara, and then Stanford. So some universities there tried to interconnect their devices, their network LANs using packet switch networks. Right around that time, TCP and IP protocols were invented in 72. But these were, once again, right, rarely used for in just experimental basis at a few universities. One prominent, it's not in the slides, used their experiment there was, I mentioned, I think in the previous class, University of Hawaii wanted their different islands to cooperate, to talk. So that was one of the first instances of Wi-Fi network, right? There are campuses in different islands of Hawaii communicating wirelessly through packet switch networks. So today we see internet today, World Wide Web is the most common application that we see. Then multimedia, right, which is Skype, video sharing, WhatsApp, Viber, various kinds. Peer-to-peer applications are the torrent sites, which used to be popular, have reduced in popularity recently. And eventually, rest of the course, we will see architectures for all of these. Right? So these are the major applications we see. Okay. So what is the protocol I explained in the previous class? Right? Right. It's the equivalent of an algorithm, except here multiple devices communicate. So the steps are interconnected. So you don't, the sequence of steps you threw at each machine is a function of the sequence of the previous machine and the channel, right? Did the packet reach? Did you get acknowledged? Only then will you send the next packet. So each protocol must be obviously technically defined correctly, right? Proper syntax, proper semantics. One of the common jobs in networks is to code these protocols. One of my first jobs was I was given the protocol description in detail and actually to code them in a hardware description language in Verilog, which was where you design a DLD circuit. Final topic is, so we discussed IMEI numbers in the beginning, right? And copied IMEI numbers, people faking IMEI numbers. So the point, so here the point to realize is, for the internet as a whole, there is no universal standard or licensing organization. Like here, suppose you buy a car, you have to get the car registered with BRTA, right? If you want to make a passport, you cannot print a passport at home. You have to go to the passport office. Passport office will issue you a passport and will make sure that the passport numbers are unique to everybody in the country, right? So for internet, what happened historically is it did not grow up. It did not become popular. Guys, I need 1 second. Okay, guys. Okay, so the way the internet evolved has been naturally and sporadic. Naturally means, no one could plan it. Imagine a road network. When in Bangladesh, if you want to build a road, right, you cannot, or a person cannot just make a road. You have to apply for permission from the Roads and Highways Department, right? And so internet, what happened was, it was people randomly interconnecting. So that's why there is no universal authority that you have to take a license from. And a very important point on this aspect is that is why there is no map of the entire internet. Once again, no one knows, like in Google Maps, you can essentially get the map of every place in the world, right? If you want to, in theory, plan a road trip from here to Singapore, you would be able to plan your entire route with all possible alternative routes, right? In the internet, there is no global topology. No one knows the global topology. And a lot of research goes into estimating what the internet topology most likely looks like. There are PhD theses which try to make better estimates of the global internet's map. Is everyone with me? CITS has
Yes,
a
sir.
map of IUB's IT network, IUB's lands. BTRC, I'm sure, does not have a map of the entire country. And globally, it is impossible. So the reason I said this is, okay, so there are few standards organizations that have sort of sprung up. Each is responsible for different things. So the IEEE provides MAC addresses, because somehow when hardware devices and network adapters are built, that is governed by the IEEE, and everyone accepts that, okay, someone making a legal hardware device, legal network adapter, will ask the IEEE for a MAC address. So typically, Walton, if they want to make LAN cards, will ask the IEEE for 1,000 MAC address or 1,000,000 MAC addresses, which would cover the 1 million network adapters they hope to produce in the next year. There are similar certain things governed by the Electronic Industries Association of the US. ANSI governs the coding scheme, ASCII and Unicode, right? Like we mentioned, Morse code for telegraph. So if you encode in such a manner, every device in the world you hope would be able to decode it. So ANSI, American National Standards Institute, defines the coding. ITU governs IP addresses. ISO governs International Standards Organization. We'll see this governs how different protocols are managed, in the sense who will be responsible in your network, in your computer network, or in your hardware for which features. For example, if a packet is received in error, will the MAC address test the parity bit, or will the software test it? Right? If you're using it for email, will the hardware match the password, or will the browser test it? So these are decisions made by the International Standards Organization, and everybody has agreed to abide by it. Federal Communications Commission, FCC, which is the US equivalent of BTRC, this governs the physical band of transmission. Right? In the electromagnetic spectrum, that is divided into a wireless band, within the wireless band into TV transmission, radio transmission, and for the Army's security transmission different. So the electromagnetic spectrum, how will it be divided? In the US, the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, determines this, and using the same method, BTRC does it in Bangladesh. And actually, they use the same division. The Internet Task Force defines different internet protocols like TCP and IP. Suppose there is a new version of TCP, there's more sophisticated version of TCP that you propose, that some researcher has proposed. So the IATF will agree. Once the IATF agrees to it, people in the world will accept it. Okay? So from here, once again, I will not ask you detail about which organization is responsible for which, but I went through this to explain to you that the internet grew up naturally. It was not planned. And that is why there are so many different standards organizations, each are responsible for different things. Okay. So finish chapter 1. Posted once again the homework. Is everyone aware of the objective of the homework? Is anyone not aware? So I have personally gone through every problem.
Yeah, you're lagging.
Okay. In the slides, is everything clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
So
sir.
I'm said regarding the homework, is everyone aware of what the objective of the homework is?
Yeah, we just have to practice and not sub.
Exactly. You do it for practice, and ideally, like I said, I will recommend you read the textbook first and then think of the homework as a mock exam. No one is grading you, there is no pressure. But if you can do the problems, you know you're prepared for the exam, right? It will be a self-test.
Sir, will you give the solution or something?
This one, I haven't typed up all the solutions. If you ask me specific questions, I will tell you how to do it. And I'm sure, I think you can find the solution online. You can find the solution to the book, the solution to the homework problems.
Okay, sir.
Okay. I'll see if I have access to it. But I mean, every semester, I've been teaching it for, I think, 3 semesters now. People have been able to find the solution. You know, if one of you find the solution, you can mail it to me separately. Or, you know, if one of you post it, once again, I don't have to worry, right? You know, ethically, I'm not allowed to post it. But if a student posts it, I can ignore. Okay, and I'm telling you, it is found. I'm sure this is a standard book, so you will be able to find it. One other